With electric vehicles becoming affordable and widespread enough for almost anyone to own them, many countries are considering banning combustion engine cars altogether. Among them was the European Union, whose parliament has been hammering out an overall proposal to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This month, it became official. No more gas cars in Europe. First up, what is the law exactly? Starting from 2035, all combustion engines must be off the market in Europe. Automakers will only be allowed to manufacture electric cars, and there'll be no more combustion engine cars for people to buy. It'll really be the end of the internal combustion engine in a part of the world where cars have a deep and lasting heritage. This might not sound as technical as laws usually sound, and that's because it's less a law and more of an order from the European Parliament to member states of the EU. They want combustion engine cars gone after 2035, and they're giving flexibility to the countries themselves in how to achieve that objective. It also sends an early warning signal to the automotive industry to start changing their product roadmaps, and Europe's biggest car makers are taking notice. Mercedes, Renault, BMW, and many others have plans to switch their sales in Europe to electric only, and so do foreign brands like Ford and Land Rover. A key thing to note is that this regulation doesn't mean Europe is going to come and take your car. You'll still be able to drive the combustion engine car you have, and you might even buy second-hand cars from other people, at least at first. This ban simply stops automakers from selling new combustion engine cars. The idea is that a decade or so after 2035, people's combustion engine cars will be falling apart, and the only way to replace them would be electric. So the effect of this rule is a slow burn, kind of the opposite of how combustion engines actually work. So what are the challenges against it? This ban wasn't passed in Parliament without a fight, and it won't be accepted by European countries without a fight either. 2035 is a long way off, and the EU has to overcome a few challenges to get there. The regulation already had to fend off opposition from the more conservative groups in Parliament who wanted to weaken the ban. What they were calling for is a 90% reduction in carbon emissions rather than 100%, and they came up with all sorts of reasons for the change. There were two reasons they cited for their opposition. First was that the EU was always supposed to be a technology-neutral regulator, yet the ban targets tailpipe emissions. The tailpipe is obviously the last step in the whole car, so to ensure that there's zero carbon in the tailpipe, you'd have to ensure there's no carbon anywhere in the car. This faction of Parliament members argued that this legislation gave an impression that the EU was favoring electric and fuel cell cars over any other type of cars, like those run by biofuels or hypothetical e-fuels. The second reason they brought up was that European countries didn't really have the comprehensive charging networks that can be found in, say, the US. Though electric vehicles can be charged at home, their range becomes pretty limited if you can't ensure the availability of chargers. The easy counter-argument against that, of course, was that the impending ban would encourage countries and companies to invest in building out charger networks. 13 years is a long time. Besides conservative parliamentarians, we talked about automakers and their plans for electrification, but it's not like they've gone down without a fight. The German car industry in particular was definitely up in arms about the ban. They argued on most of the same points as conservative politicians, but they also expressed concerns over how expensive this would be. They talked about the cost to people, but they must be worried about the cost to themselves too. Their stance is that if this ban has to happen, it should be at a later date. So far, the climate has won out against these groups, but the ban isn't in effect yet. It's up to the pro-climate factions in the European Parliament, as well as in the countries themselves, to stay firm on their vision of a zero-carbon 2050. Now for the road ahead. The next phase of rolling out the ban is implementing it in the law books of the member states, in the factories of automakers, and on the roads of Europe. On the positive side of this ban's rollout, the auto industry in Europe had already seen the signs of the times and adjusted its production accordingly. BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, and Audi have already added some really popular electric vehicles to their fleet, and more are to follow. Volvo is ahead of the curve. All of their new models are either 100% electric or plug-in hybrids, so they can comply with the ban as soon as they get rid of the hybrids. Jaguar Land Rover, Maserati, and Mercedes have announced plans to fully electrify their lineups by 2026, as has Audi. Bentley and Porsche have a more conservative estimate of 2030, and Volkswagen may be producing a few combustion engine models all the way to 2035. All the same though, European cars are going through a sea change right now, but it isn't all smooth sailing. The two countries that produce the most cars in Europe are Germany and France, and their governments are siding with their auto industries in opposing this ban. They're raising the same points about a lack of chargers and the cost to consumers, and they want to extend the deadline from 2035. Germany's finance minister also pointed out that it was unfair to European drivers who specifically wanted a combustion engine car, either for a specialized use case or because they're enthusiasts. Can the EU's legislation clear these hurdles? Germany and France are two of the biggest powers in the EU, and they have the ability to rally other countries around them. Another variable in the mix is the ongoing war in Ukraine, which has seriously disrupted the oil market and has many people considering switching to electric electric. Would Germany and France defy the will of the people if the people want electric cars? Only time can tell, and there's a lot of time till 2035. Next, in other news, EV sales in Europe are electric. If European governments are concerned that their people won't be able to afford to go electric by 2035, the numbers seem to show that they're worrying a bit too much. According to Schmidt Automotive Research, June represents the 11th straight month where new plug-in electric cars accounted for 20% of all new car purchases in Western Europe. Comparing units sold, 878,000 electric cars were sold in June 2022 compared to 777,700 sold this time last year, which was also a lot. Looking at the stats, Schmidt Automotive thinks that electric cars are on track to represent 25% of the total market share of cars in Western Europe by the end of the year. EV adoption is going crazy. These sales aren't just down to climate concerns, of course. Germany's been subsidizing purchases of electric cars for a bit, and they're supposedly ending the subsidy in 2023, so the German sales in particular might just represent people striking while the iron's hot. The sales show that Germany achieved their goal with the subsidy, though with this newly passed EU legislation, they might want to consider keeping that subsidy around a little longer. And now, Tesla isn't doing too hot in Europe. With Europe making a push towards electrification of their cars, it's no surprise that Tesla wanted in on the action. They have a shiny new plant over in Berlin, though Elon Musk doesn't seem all that happy with how it's doing. He complained recently that the Berlin and Texas plants are gigantic money furnaces right now that are burning through billions of dollars. These comments come as part of Musk's justification for his planned layoffs. A whopping 10% of their salaried staff will be given their walking papers over the coming months, which is kind of the opposite of what you'd expect when a company opens new factories. As far as Europe will be concerned, we'll have to see if Tesla can replace their money furnace with a money tree anytime soon. They've got stiff competition over there. Finally, we have China, the new electric king. The biggest benefactor of the world's demand for electric vehicles seems to be China at the moment. As COVID lockdowns are easing up in the country, their exports of electric cars are ramping back up. Just in June, they shipped an insane $1.2 billion worth of electric cars, tripling their sales volume from April and boasting an increase of 122% since this time last year. China's biggest foreign market right now happens to be in Europe, which represented half of these gargantuan sales. Most of the rest of these sales were in Asia. It looks like Tesla's difficulties to penetrate the Asian and European markets will remain a thorn in their side, making their American dominance more and more key to their business. That's all for our electric vehicle coverage today. What do you think of this upcoming ban on combustion vehicles? Do you think Europe will be ready to go fully electric in 2035, or are these concerns that can't be addressed by then? Fire up your keyboard in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe before racing off.